Chasing false positives, battling alert fatigue, finding the proverbial needle in a haystack. It all leads to cybersecurity staff burnout and increased security risk. Check out Managed XDR from Netshurian. Netshurian's open XDR platform unifies your telemetry for wider attack surface coverage, deeper threat detection, and ultimately faster incident response. And Netshurian SOC empowers your team by doing the heavy lifting with continuous monitoring, proactive threat hunting, and guided remediation. Looking for a true partner instead of another vendor? Visit msspalert.com/Netshurian. All right, welcome back to Cyber for Hire, the Managed Security Podcast. Once again, I'm Bradley Barth with SC Media. In the first half of our show, we talked about the business strategies around XDR with Chris Bell from SecureWorks. A lot of interesting stuff there to come out of that conversation. If you missed it, you might want to consider going back at some point and watching the first half of our show. But right now, I'd like to welcome back my co-host, Ryan Morris from Morris Management Partners, because it's time for us to examine our InfoSec news and trends topic of the day, presenting our big idea in security. Apple and Linux threats. Do MSSPs need more non-Windows specialists? Once upon a time, organizations that relied on Macs or Linux machines could rest easy knowing that they were too few in number for cybercriminals to bother targeting them. This is no longer the case. As adoption of non-Windows operating systems has increased, so has the number of incidents victimizing devices running on these OSes. So in this segment, we're going to identify some of the latest non-Windows cyber threats and assess whether MSSPs currently have the specialized knowledge to successfully service organizations that run on macOS, iOS, Linux, and other less common operating systems. So, Ryan, let's talk about this a little bit. I mean, here's just even real quick a group of headlines that I pulled from even just, let's say, the last couple of weeks or month. Numerous ransomware stories talking about things like Royal Ransomware becoming the latest ransomware operation to add support for encrypting Linux devices, specifically targeting the VMware ESXi virtual machines. Other ransomware groups also, whether like Iron Tiger out of China, updating one of its malware frameworks to attack Linux-based systems. Trend Micro recently identified a 75% increase in ransomware attacks targeting Linux systems. Certainly all of that concerning. And then you have things too like news of Apple making patches for vulnerabilities and things like its WebKit that were being actively exploited by cyber criminals as well. Stories of hackers using Trojanized macOS apps to deploy cryptocurrency mining malware. So there you go. I mean, and those are just ones from the last few weeks in headlines. So is this really indicative of the fact that non-Windows users really aren't safe anymore? And what's your biggest concern around all of that?
You know, Bradley, I love that kind of panoply of headlines, because I think that the easy answer to this question, right? You started with the question of, do MSSPs need more non-Windows specialists? I think the fundamental answer is yes. Yes, they do. They need them now, and they need them in quantity. I agree with your kind of original premise. The good old days of cybersecurity, there were neighborhoods that were popular to attack, and there were neighborhoods that were just so small and isolated. They were specialized. They were not nearly as lucrative or connected to production systems. So, you know what? Let's not even bother to attack those. Security through obscurity was a strategy for a bunch of years. That is absolutely, positively no longer the case. What we live with today is an equal threat environment that approaches agnostically whatever operating system platform you are on. Literally, just last week, I was sitting on a bench in an airport. I was waiting to get on, and I get the alert from Apple that says, to paraphrase, you better update your OS right away because there's a critical exploited patch that needs to be applied in iOS. And I thought to myself, Okay, welcome to the mainstream. Congratulations. You now are on an operating system that's large enough that people care about it. That is radically too late in the game for an MSSP to start paying attention to these things. You remember from the first half of today's conversation, we were talking to Chris Bell from SecureWorks. And Chris, one of the things that keeps him up at night is the manufacturing environment of non-Windows operating system connected devices. I echo that times 1,000. I think we live in a world now where everything has either a sensor or an IP address connected to it. And if it has one of those things, it absolutely needs to be included in the cyber strategy, and it needs to be covered by technologies. In my experience, and I'm sure in yours as well, I don't know too many engineers who are equally expert on a Windows platform, on the Mac platforms, on the Linux platform, on the embedded systems platforms. It is asking too much for us to have one group of humans who are equally expert in all of those technologies. The expansion strategy is it's complete malpractice for us to not cover those systems and vulnerabilities for our customers. It's not reasonable to expect one group of humans to know all of those things. The result is 1+1 equals we need specialists, and we need to start ramping up those capabilities right away.
All right, so where are you going to find that experience? Because as it is, it's already hard to find talent to begin with. Now you need to find specialized talent. Where are you going to find people, or how are you going to train up people to become more familiar in those environments? I feel like that's a golden question. So solve the problem for us, Ryan. How are we going to fix that?
Yeah, you know what? It is the golden question, and you're right on target. It's hard enough to find somebody who knows technology, and then you make that technology cybersecurity, and then you make it on an obscure manufacturing embedded system platform that is, it's been in place for long enough that it predates a lot of the security thresholds or capabilities that we take for granted now. And yet it's running a factory that if you take it offline, the downtime's not counted in minutes or hours. It's counted in millions and tens of millions of dollars of lost business opportunity. That makes a very specialized approach. The good news is we've seen some really positive examples of groups that are starting to address that, right? Number one, let's stop being so precious about advanced degree requirements in terms of cybersecurity capabilities. Let's approach this with an enablement mentality. If you are a technology savvy individual who has the desire to work in cybersecurity, I think we have the capability to train you up. I think as an industry, we can make you capable. What's necessary is somebody with the basic savvy who has the desire, and then we need to start bringing those people in. As a second source, we've seen where organizations, and let me be clear, this is not just large organizations. This is MSSPs with 15 total employees, and they go to a local college, university, community college, tech program school, right? And they set up internship programs where they will bring people in the midst of their study curriculum and let them spend 3 months, 6 months in the trenches, learning the system approach, learning the fundamentals of cybersecurity, and then they go back and finish school. And when they come out, they get to make a choice. Is that something I want to do for a living or not? We're familiar with a couple of groups that are one domestically here that I could point to. We won't say their names, but because this is secret sauce that gives them a real competitive advantage. But there's a group here in the U.S. and another in Germany that I am personally familiar with who they've set up internship and education programs to manufacture the next level of human resources for these specialized environments, and they are yielding dozens of qualified individuals out of these programs every single semester. And these are not companies with thousands of employees, right? Like one of them is 100 employees, one of them's maybe 150 employees, and yet they crank dozens of qualified individuals every single semester. This is what's unique, where I think it goes into the embedded systems, right? Because it's one thing for Apple, it's one thing for Linux, and what's extra special for the Linux world, we don't use Linux for your laptop or mine in most situations, right? I know a few who run their laptop on Linux, and congratulations to those guys, right? Usually that's a manufacturing system. That's a DevOps system. That's heavy lifting on a computing side. We don't use Linux for peripheral applications. So it's very critical that we get in there. But I think we all need to start paying attention to the OT and connected devices world. And we just need to start manufacturing people with these capabilities, because there's not enough. And that's a tremendous gap in coverage that we're leaving as a vulnerability right now.
No, absolutely, Ryan. It's a great point, and it even makes me think of remembering covering as a reporter and editor for SC Media when there would occasionally be news of there was one group of vulnerabilities I remember in particular. I think maybe it was the folks at Armis Security that maybe discovered it. It was a group of vulnerabilities called Urgent 11 that were basically all found in real-time operating systems. And at first you would go like, oh well, I mean it's real-time operating systems, so I mean how big of a problem is that necessarily? Well, it was running on more than something like 2 billion devices, many in like industrial, healthcare, and like enterprise environments. So it's, pretty significant. So really, if you can develop specialization in embedded or real-time operating systems, or Apple systems or Linux or whatever, it really is a great opportunity to also corner that area of the market. It might be an investment at first, but it could have some yield some really big gains for you later, I would imagine.
Totally true. And that is, I'll take that from two perspectives. Number one, the embedded device manufacturing industry. If we think of that as a neighborhood of technology, it represents 15% of economic activity, if you will, GDP in the US, in Europe. It represents 15-ish% of total economic activity, but it also represents something like 80% of the population of embedded devices. And as a result, you do simple arithmetic, it represents of lion's share. The latest statistics that I've seen are better than 60% of alerts for embedded systems happen in this one little neighborhood over here that is highly unique and highly intensive on the need for uptime and security. If you wanted to build a practice area tomorrow that would have a large addressable market that has an urgency for consumption, I would say let's go talk embedded devices in manufacturing. And just to be careful on that recommendation, you don't just show up to those places and say, I am cybersecurity expert, let me tell you cybersecurity, and they just say, great, you're an expert, I'm going to change the way I do things to accommodate your technical boundaries and systems. You don't get to change the OS and the connectivity and the interoperability of manufacturing systems. As an IT person, those things are hardwired, and we work with them to make them better and more secure. We don't get to walk in and say, I'm an MSSP, I have a standard stack of technology, you either conform to my standards or you don't get to play in my game. Manufacturers will say to you, go away and never come back, right? Like it's a brutal set of expectations, but it is an unbelievably lucrative opportunity because the quantity on connected devices. I mean, if you really want to freak yourself out for just a quick second, do a Google search on industrial machine automation and cybersecurity, right? Do that little Boolean search out there in the world, and your hair will stand on end, because it's phenomenal to see the advancements in technology in manufacturing, the way that testing, simulation, automation, robotics, it's phenomenal to see the advancements of technology. It is unbelievably scary to see how outdated their connectivity and security protocols are. Like simple stuff, like let's have an actual password on a piece of production equipment that is protected and only certain individuals know. No, that thing's on the shop floor. 500 individuals are going to use that machine over the course of an 8-hour shift. 500 individuals know the password because it's written on a card and it's taped to the side of that machine. Holy crap. Like these are places where we need to be paying attention, and they are places where there is tremendous upside if we do, for the customer and for our business. So it's a great piece of technology for us to focus on right now.
Yeah, Ryan, we're obviously talking a lot about the potential business gains for making this a focus. And certainly this is one of those topics, as many of them are, that sort of straddle the line between its security news, it's also business and industry strategy news. Focusing a little bit more on the security news side of things, do you also see that there's a lot of cyber criminal outfits right there that recognize the fact that there is a lag in response to non-Windows based threats, that they're seeing that maybe the users and operators of these systems are kind of saying like, hey, we're safe, or we're not the primary targets, and so it ends up making them, ironically, an easy target?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. We're not nearly the first people to wake up and say, whoops, this is an uncovered vulnerability. We should probably cover that up from an operating perspective. The bad guys are perfectly well aware of this, and they are developing very sophisticated attacks that are going into what is the average Windows operating environment over the last 10 years has gone through a learning curve around cybersecurity that has, like, you can't be in a Windows environment and claim to not be aware of cybersecurity threats. That would be a completely unbelievable thing for you to say. But on the other side of the world, when you say Apple, Linux, and embedded, that is actually unfortunately true. There are still people that they wake up every day and they've not been 10 years the target of sophisticated attacks. And so the defense line is fairly low. The bad guys have been getting really good at this for a decade or more, and they are attacking soft targets that are unfortunately very easy to penetrate and exploit. And so when we look at this, there are headlines that happen in a manufacturing environment every single day, and we think, are they not paying attention? Are like, what's wrong with these with these manufacturers or with these other organizations that are being compromised? Why are they not doing it? They literally didn't need to for years, and so they didn't. Right, so they didn't pay attention. It's not hardwired into the DNA of those kinds of technical operators to begin every minute. First things first, let's think about secure connections, and then let's talk application functionality, and then let's get into the operating side of our business. That's how we think. That is not how the manufacturing and operating technology world thinks. Bad guys are coming. This dials up the urgency, I think, significantly higher than other what might be larger market segments. I think that one's the more urgent market segment.
Yeah, for sure. I would just say maybe before we wrap, just kind of again looking at sort of the threat landscape for non-Windows organizations. What to you right now, based on just what you're seeing in the intelligence feeds, the news headlines? What's maybe the biggest red flag for you that the users that should be aware of?
Yeah, you know what? The first thing that I think of in this world is that, unfortunately, inside capabilities, our technical tool sets are not all universally compatible into those operating environments, right? There are many XDR, MDR, SIM platform tools. There are other things that are OS dependent, and they have boundary limitations into those other worlds. That's a new filtering threshold for us from a technical point of view. I think we need to go back to scratch and say, the tools that I use to do my job every single day, are they agnostic to the operating system platform? And are they equally featured and capable for me to deliver an integrated service to my customers in those environments? The piece of advice that's just ringing in my head, Chris said it in the first half of our conversation today. If you expect your alert agents to receive all of the intelligence from the environment and be notified and then go into multiple different pieces of software to remedy those kinds of threats that are attacking the environment, you're going to manufacture stress and inefficiency that will cause successful penetrations. So we need tools that are equally capable in both the Windows world and the non-Windows world. And then we need to be able to empower an agent community that is capable of actually solving that. We said at the beginning, I don't expect one individual to know everything about all of those operating environments, but I'm going to put the request out there to the industry. If you sell a tool that I'm supposed to use for solving my customers' problems, and they have Windows and Mac and Linux, etc., in their environment, if you don't give me a tool set that allows me to address all of those environments, then we are doing malpractice as an industry. So I think that's the biggest red flag that I'm currently paying attention to. All right, guys, this is obviously big topic and a lot that we could continue to go on, but we want to wrap up here for this part of the conversation. If you have questions, if you have insights, if you have war stories from the trenches out there in the non-Windows environment, please reach out to us at cyber4hire at cyberriskalliance.com or go visit our show page. We would love to keep this conversation going. So let us know what your thoughts and feedback are. But what we want to do now, after we have finished our big idea in security, we're going to move into the remaining segments of our conversation. We've got some news headlines coming up. But before there, we want to get into our Dear Cyber for Hire segment. So Dear Cyber for Hire is a relationship management segment where we are playing marriage counselors between MSPs and their clients and trying to help everybody figure out how we can just get along. So we've taken a real world situation. We've removed some details to anonymize this to protect the innocent. But believe us, this conflict is something that happens in the real world. So Bradley, I want to turn it over to you to tee up for us. What is our relationship dilemma this week?
I'm excited to share this one with you today, Ryan. And it fits nicely so we have an ongoing specialization theme today. And this fits very nicely into that. We got some more juicy MSSP melodrama for you. And this one's going to come from the client side of the relationship. So guys, cue the music. Dear Cyber for Hire, I thought I was destined to have it all. A prestigious career in a highly respected industry, and the perfect MSSP life partner. But it seems as if I may have to choose. I should probably explain. You see, I work in an industry that comes with its own unique set of risks. Maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's government, maybe it's manufacturing. Let's keep it a mystery. The point is, it feels as if my managed services provider doesn't really support or even fully understand what I do for a living. At least it feels that way because the protections and services they offer seem to be the same regardless of my sector, my profession. And now I'm starting to wonder if maybe the TLC I'm looking for is a little more tailored to my personal needs. Is it my job to make them understand my needs and make them change? Should I have been more choosy about finding the right match in the first place? Please help. Sincerely, seeking sector-specialized support in Saratoga Springs. Ryan, what do you think? Can we make this relationship still work? Are there too many irreconcilable differences? Was there the mistake at the very beginning that they should have found a more sector-specialized provider? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
You know, I dare you to say that 5 times in a row real fast. Seeking sector specialized support. That's a good tongue twister. To directly answer your question, that is not the customer's mistake at the beginning of the relationship. That was a lack of viable alternatives, right? It's not like the customer wants to get into business with a service provider who does not understand their needs and does not understand the unique dimensions of their vertical industry and their specialized requirements. It's that there really are not that many specialized MSSPs out there in the world. I think this is a generational thing, right? Like when we were first getting started as a cybersecurity industry, we were very, by definition, device and threat oriented. We were very isolated in terms of the pods of threat and response and the technologies that we would use. The next generation of the industry, we became very horizontally oriented, right? I need to understand all of these technologies across the entire stack, from the edge to the core, and all the layers of security. That was hard. That was complicated. There was a lot to learn. We are now entering, I believe, we are already in an environment that requires not a horizontal approach to cybersecurity, not just a vertical approach, but it's that plus symbol of we get the horizontal and we get the vertical at the same time. And it's that intersection where a customer will legitimately find value. You need to be good at cybersecurity, but you also need to be equally expert in the dynamics of my vertical industry. Because as you touched on in the tee up there, the cybersecurity requirements for a Windows server in a on-prem data center and client network connectivity environment, okay, there are some commonalities in that configuration across all industries. But there are more meaningful distinctions between healthcare, financial services, manufacturing than there will ever be commonalities. Irrespective of the devices that your customers use, what matters is the business processes that they run and how that is required to be exposed to external or third-party contributors, right? Some businesses, very isolated, very self-contained. We can be very much in charge of their environment. Others literally cannot do their jobs without direct input into the master database from third parties across a public connectivity or a cloud environment. That's a radically different set of cybersecurity challenges. What we cannot do is go to the customer and say, you may not do business the way you want. You must do it the way that I require. That will literally never work. We are the ones who need to learn and start to become vertically specialized.
All right. Well, great. Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it. Or, just bring Ryan on as a consultant because he knows everything about everything. So he's a specialist in all things horizontal and vertical. He's quite amazing. But no, thanks again. Always, Ryan. Very sage advice. Hopefully our listeners have learned from you and they won't make the same mistakes. And remember that if you've been struggling with your managed security services relationship, whether you're the user or the provider, we want to hear from you. So please write to us at cyberforhire@cyberriskalliance.com, and we might use your letter in a future episode. In the meantime, as any security practitioner can tell you, there's no shortage of headlines filling up the cyber news feeds every single day. So we wanted to highlight a few items that we curated just for you. So we present to you the security detail. And Ryan, as always, I'm going to gift you the first headline here, and we're interested to hear your analysis. The major U.S. Marshals hack exposed critical security data. This was a pretty big deal. I want to hear your thoughts.
We'll start with the good news, right? If there is any in this scenario, the WITSEC database was not compromised. Okay, so if that's the good news part of this conversation, we are so far into a bad news environment that it really should send chills up and down everybody's spine. An individual device, a client laptop essentially in the field was left vulnerable, not protected with the layers that we would recommend, and it was compromised, and that did lead to the exposure of some legitimate information information about ongoing investigations, security targets, and criminal threats that the U.S. Marshal Service was dealing with. Holy shit. That makes my skin crawl. That is unbelievable. But the reason we wanted to highlight this headline for you guys out there, never assume that just because the information is literally life and death critical, that means your customer knows how to deal with it appropriately. It is a government agency. It is a mission critical operating function. It is something that you would assume that would be already like radically protected and locked down inside every form of cybersecurity protection that we can imagine. And it absolutely was not safe to assume that. So please do not assume that just because you are working with sophisticated clients who have incredibly complex data and high value targets, do not assume that they know what's going on and that things are okay. Let's double check. Let's make sure that our clients are safe and ready to proceed. Okay. Second headline, Bradley, I'll toss it back to you with this one. An employee's hacked home PC allowed a threat actor access to the LastPass corporate vault. Uh-oh. What do we need to know here?
Yeah, there's been a few different updates on this, but the latest, to quickly summarize, there was an initial incident, a breach that took place back in August. LastPass responded, but apparently not before the actor lifted some encrypted credentials. Since the decryption keys were in very highly protected locations, the threat actor opted to target a DevOps engineer's home PC using a vulnerability in a third-party media package to install a keylogger that captured the master key as the engineer entered it. So a lot to digest here, but certainly some key lessons. LastPass initially thinking it was in the clear after remediating the initial problem. Generally speaking, it's always a good lesson to change all passwords after an incident, even if the stolen passwords were encrypted. Also, if you deal in valuable enough information, you're going to be a worthwhile enough target to a threat actor to target a specific employee. In this case, as what happened, going after one of their home devices. Not saying specifically or commenting on what LastPass did or didn't do in the following regard. I'm not saying they did or didn't do this, but home PCs need to be regularly updated as well, especially if you're doing corporate work on it. If your home device is not corporate controlled and patched, then perhaps you shouldn't be allowed to do work on the device anyway, especially if you're dealing in highly sensitive data. So all of the above that I just said are certainly key lessons that can be applied to MSSPs and their clients. And with that, we're going to move on to headline number 3, which is ransomware attack on chip equipment supplier causes delays for chip suppliers. Ryan, let's hear from you.
So the first thing that we want to observe here, and again, we won't get down into the details. Everybody can do the homework and find these actual articles. We're providing the links in our show notes. So please get in there and catch up on this. The chip manufacturing industry has had less than an ideal season over the last couple of years. Between the pandemic and supply chain implications, the availability of chips has been on severe constraint, and the industry has been scrambling to try and get back up. Now, we've seen some tremendous progress in the availability of certain classes of components and certain types of chip manufacturers. And just when we think it's about to be okay, a company, one single entity that provides a piece of equipment that makes chips and motherboards, et cetera, right? Like, so this is a company that produces equipment that then your well-known and branded chip manufacturers will use to create what they do for a living. That original equipment supplier was compromised. And because they were compromised, ransomware took them offline. They thought it was going to be down for a couple of days. It was down for multiple weeks, and the implications are cascading through the industry, right? That company that was compromised has lost 20, some estimates say 50% of their quarterly revenue that was forecast, and it is having a direct and very significant negative impact on their stock price. And if that was all that was happening, that would be terrible. But because they make a piece of equipment and they have literally like 80% market share, so the very large and well-known chip manufacturers, they are now having material impact on their ability to fulfill and manufacture their own chips. And that's impacting their revenue, and it's now impacting their stock price. What everybody needs to understand is that manufacturing, and we talked about this a few minutes ago, manufacturing is a fundamentally interconnected industry. And if one player gets sick, everybody starts to pay the price across the industry. And what you and I are going to feel down on the street level is an unfortunate environment of, hey, you that car you wanted to buy, the chip you thought was going to be available and the availability that was getting better, so the price was coming down. We need to talk about that again, because it's no longer going to be healthy for a period until this one equipment supplier finally resolves their ransomware situation and gets back up and running. So massive implications that are going on out there. I would highly encourage people to please pay attention to the manufacturing segment, but also go to the show notes and download this article, because from the Financial Times, it has a very interesting non-technical perspective on the implications of cybersecurity. So I really appreciated that. Fourth headline, Bradley, let me bounce it back to you. Walmart leaked a memo, let me say that again differently. A memo from Walmart that was leaked warns employees not to enter company secrets into ChatGPT. Okay, now we're into a brave new world, Bradley. What do we need to know?
Yeah, we certainly are. Amazon and Microsoft gave similar warnings to employees as well, according to the Daily Mail, which noted that the tool at one point successfully mimicked internal Amazon data, which prompted a lawyer to caution employees not to share any internal codes or confidential information with the AI software. It's interesting because we've talked a little bit on the show already about the threat of generative AI in terms of crafting malware or accidentally generating code that contains open source vulnerabilities that can be exploited. What we haven't really talked about as much on our program is the question of whether searches on tools like GPT or conversations that you have with ChatGPT or data or information that you enter into the system could potentially be leveraged later by malicious actors. Could you be revealing corporate secrets about yourself through your history with a generative AI engine? And might it be possible for outsiders to access that? So just more things to think about as you craft your own policies around ChatGPT and other generative AI services. And so with that, that's going to do it for the security detail, except for, drumroll please, our irrelevant news item of the week. This is a real news pitch that either Ryan or I have received in our inboxes for reasons that are entirely inexplicable to us. We'll see if somehow we can make it about cybersecurity, although I'm not sure if I can find a good connection on this one, or I don't know if I even really care. Are you ready, Ryan? Because this is a good one.
Absolutely. Let's go.
All right. I do get a lot of video game pitches. It's been a while since I read one, so here comes the pitch. The Last of Us is the most searched TV show adapted from a video game, with a search volume of 301,000 searches per month. This study, conducted by online jigsaw site I'm a Puzzle, analyzed over 50 TV series and anime that have been adapted from video games over the last 30 years to discover which are the most searched for. If you're wondering who else makes the top of this list, number 2, I didn't even know some of these were shows. I know about The Last of Us. I'm not living under a rock. But we have Cyberpunk Edge Runners, then Halo, and then fourth place is Netflix's Castlevania, which by the way, I just downloaded the classic 8 and 16-bit versions of that game on my Xbox, and it still holds up. Now, here's my question to you, Ryan. There was a pretty funny SNL skit a couple of weeks ago that made fun of this trend of converting video games to shows. So they made, in the spirit of The Last of Us, it was Super Mario Kart, the gritty apocalyptic TV show. So, what in your mind would maybe be the worst game that you could think of to adapt to a television show?
See, that's an excellent question. And like you said, has absolutely nothing to do with cybersecurity other than the fact that somebody out there in that world must know that every single person who is in cybersecurity also emotionally cares very much about the video game world, right? We are a birds of a feather community over here, right? So we care about this stuff a lot. I agree with you. I think some of these movie adaptations are a little bit too far, right? Like, when certain video games were adapted to movies, we go into that with a certain degree of suspicion. And if you've played the game, if you know it inside and out, right, you go into it with a certain degree of suspicion because you don't think it's going to get treated well. And some of them have legitimately been positive surprises. I would put The Last of Us into that category. That's gripping. That is drama. That is as though it were written for a Hollywood screen adaptation, originally not a video game. But I think I'm going to echo the guys at Saturday Night Live. The fact that we're trying to add drama to things that we think are fun, that's some of us in our video game time, we like to shoot things, and sometimes we like to play sports, and sometimes we like to race various objects and cars and vehicles around. When we're doing the third category, when we are in race mode, we understand it's not serious, right? Like, none of us is over here thinking that there is actual drama associated with these video games. We do them for fun. And when you adapt them to make them a movie, there has to be conflict, there has to be drama. I don't want to see drama in Mario Kart. Thank you very much. This is a place where I go for fun and for escape. Please do not bring your drama into my Mario Kart world.
I mean, I hear you on that one, Ryan. I mean, I don't hear, if I was going to pitch one to you right now, I'll keep it old school. I think a pretty bad one would be, how about an adaptation of Frogger? Couldn't you just hear right now, like one of the old school movie trailer announcers going like, "Why did Frogger cross the road? To save his family from a terrible fate. But one thing stands in his way, the world's busiest highway." And then just imagine it go from there.
In a world where a frog has to cross a street. You know what? That's the thing. What everybody that's not a fan of video games needs to understand is that the industry of video games is not... It's not just source material for Hollywood. As an industry, dollar for dollar, video games is radically larger than Hollywood, right? Where there's more money spent, more money invested in creating content in the video game world than Hollywood will ever get to. My answer is go be creative on your own, guys. Like, come up with your own storylines. That's a place. Leave our media to our consumption in our preferred interactive format. Y'all go over and get creative and do your own script writing over there.
All right, fair enough. Well, with that, it's game over because we've run out of time. So all I can say is that there'll be more coming from Cyber for Hire in the coming weeks. Don't worry. We're going to be back again with episode number 12. Meanwhile, feel free to check out even more cybersecurity podcast content on the SC Media, MSSP Alert, and Channel E2E websites. Until next time, I'm Bradley Barth.
And I am Ryan Morris. Please reach out to our show page and our email address and let us know your comments, questions, and insights about the world and the business of cybersecurity. We will keep the conversation going on the next episode of Cyber for Hire, your inside source for cyber outsourcing.